And so today we're going to be talking about how to build a successful base show file. So I am Rob Crane, your field project coordinator from the Southwest region, coming to you from Dallas today. And Nick Gonsman is with us from New York, as always. And then we've got a couple of guest programmers. I'll give them a fuller introduction a little bit later on, but they're going to be helping us out today. So we have Abel Sepulveda from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Jason Cochrane from Houston, Texas. So they have graciously decided to join us and help us out. So the format today is I'm going to go through and talk about some theory of base show file, talk about what it is, how it works, give you some ideas of things you may want to incorporate. And then these guys are going to actually show you their awesome base show files and go through them with us. So they may chime in. As always, we'll have a couple of Q&A breaks throughout. So please use that Q&A box in your window to ask questions as they come up. So we'll pause for those questions. So they may chime in with some thoughts before we get to their presentation on the back half of this. So we'll get to know them a little bit as we learn about base show files. Okay, so let's jump right in. So what is a base show file? So this is a console show file. Today we're talking about EOS, of course, but this applies to any platform where you have tools and tricks and things you use that you can bring from show to show. So the patch for this specific show that you're doing today, not part of your base show file. However, we'll explore a lot of tools that you can bring with you from gig to gig to gig that will speed things up, make your life easier, and just make things a lot smoother, hopefully, on any project you're working on. So who should use a base show file? Like, what type of programmer should be, are we talking to today? And it's pretty much everybody. So whether you are in the same venue day after day, if you are freelance and you're never in the same venue 2 days in a row, there are aspects of this that can apply to everyone. So like everything in the console, no single programmer is going to need all of these tools that we talk about, but everyone can pick and choose what's useful for them. And there's a lot of people are concerned. They'll say, maybe at the end of today, I have to go and spend a week making my base show file, and then it's done forever. And that is not really the case. So when do you know that your base show file is done? And it's never done. Like, it's constantly evolving. And I'm sure these guys will talk to us about that as well. It's not something that you can really do once and you're done and we'll take it away forever. It is constantly changing as you learn, as you gain more experience as a programmer, as you work on different types of gigs. So there's an ebb and flow of tools that may come and go or adapt and evolve as you go through your career as a programmer. So kind of the main focus, and I know I've said this on some of these study hall webinars before, is what the worst thing I can imagine hearing in a tech process or at a corporate gig or somewhere is to have somebody say, well, we're waiting on lighting. We're waiting on the lighting department. We're waiting, So that's kind of the reason for all of these things, is we don't want to be the reason the whole process has ground to a halt. Of course, sometimes that's inevitable, but the fewer times we can hear that and the less other people are waiting on us, the more, hidden in the background we can be. If, I'm on a job and the producer, whoever hired me, is like, oh yeah, everything was always how it was correct all the time, I never had to worry about you. That's awesome. So that's kind of the goal here. So another way of putting that is to just be fast. And that can mean different things for different gigs. Not everyone has to be the fastest lighting programmer on the planet to do the gig you're doing. That's certainly not what I'm saying. There's different levels of fast here. But really you just need to be as fast as the gig you're working on requires, or maybe a little faster, ideally. So different different kinds of gigs are going to have different paces, certainly. A theater pace is going to be different than a live event pace, different than a corporate event pace. So craft your tools in your base show file accordingly for those different types of events. Okay, so a lot of times we'll use the analogy of a toolbox for a base show file. Today I'm going to kind of run with the suitcase analogy because I thought it was more fun. So basically, your show file is your suitcase. The good news about your show file is there's not really a limit as to what you can put in there. It's kind of like a Mary Poppins kind of suitcase. You can just keep stuff in there. So the first thing I'm going to mention about this suitcase analogy is there's lots of different ways to pack that suitcase. So you can bring different things. You can pack different stuff depending on what kind of trip you're going on or what kind of show you're working on. But then you also need to organize it, and we'll talk a lot about that as well today. So these are kind of the points we're going to hit. What are you going to put in your show file? So what type of show are you going into? What shows have you done in the past? Is it a type of gig you've never worked on before? Is it something you've done a million times? So you're going to need different tools for different gigs. So as you're starting out, it's fine to have all your tools in the same show file and pull from there. As you get to be a little bit more experienced and you're working on larger projects and different types of things, it's also fine to have multiple base show files. Here's my opera show file. Here's my studio show file, for example. If you get to that, a lot of what you're going to hear me say a lot today. There's not one way to do this. It's very personal. It really needs to work for you. If it works for you, then it's correct. That's also, another main point I want to get across today. Just because it works for Abel doesn't mean it's going to work for Jason. Just because it works for Jason doesn't mean it's going to work for me. And then be organized. It is not helpful. You can't be fast if you have the right tool, but you can't find it. If you're going on vacation, I'm see how much I can beat this suitcase analogy. If you're going on vacation and you bring your snorkel, but it's buried under a bunch of other stuff in your suitcase, it doesn't help you. Like, you need to get to that snorkel or that tool or whatever you need for your trip, for your show, quickly. Basically instantly. The faster the better. So you need to have a system of organization, and that way you know where everything is. And then don't leave home without it, obviously. I carry mine around on my keychain all the time. But again, these are kind of the two main points we're going to hit today. What are we bringing? What are we packing in this suitcase? And how can we organize it so that we can get to things quickly when we need to? Okay, so I'm going to go through these topics, and we'll take a couple of question breaks as we go. And then once we get through these, I'm going to turn it over to Abel and Jason. So let's dive in. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is by-type palettes. So as a refresher, or if you're not familiar with these, by-type palettes allow you to assign a single channel that is the leader channel for any other fixtures of that type. So here I have a list of, I'm just using color palettes today, but these apply to all palette types and presets as well. So over on the right-hand side, you can see the by-type channels are listed. And then on this next one, so on the backup one, so 1 and 11 are my by-type channels. And then if I look here, we can see that channels 1 through 6 are all the same type of fixture, and channel 1 is the by-type channel. It's the leader channel, and the other ones are follower channels, which you can see from the color coding. And then 11 through 24, same thing. It's a different fixture type, so there's a different leader channel. So this is really handy because you can, if you've worked with a fixture one time, you can save that fixture as a channel somewhere in your show file. And the next time you come to a gig that has those fixtures, all of your palettes are already populated. You've got the GoPros, you've got the zoom ranges, you've got the colors, all those things. You can, of course, tweak them, and you may need to gig to gig, but it's a lot faster than starting from nothing every time. So most programmers will keep that by type channel in a really high number, just so it's up out of the way of anything they're actually using on the show. A lot of times it won't even have anything patched to it. It's a way to keep that stored so you always have it with you. We'll sometimes refer to these as dummy channels. Like they're up there, they're not in the show, but they're just helping with our database management. And then the key thing about the by type palette is you are able to update them without knowing that leader channel number. So as long as you say update target by type, the console will find the by type channel for what you're updating and update it there, and all the followers will follow right along. So you can certainly create a system of organizing these channel numbers in the, say you start those at 5001 or something in your higher channel range. So you might have moving lights in one section of channels, LEDs in one section. You could do it by manufacturer or by wash versus spot fixtures. However you do it is great. Like so it's good for you, but you don't really need to know what those numbers are on the fly because of how the console lets you, because how the syntax lets you update it. Okay, so that's it for ByType. Keep that one short and sweet. If there's any questions in general about base show files, I'm going to take a quick pause here before I get too far. We'll be saying more throughout we go here as we go. Nick, anything come in there yet?
Come in yet.
Okay.
But yeah, if you all have questions, feel free to ask them. And if it's a later section, we'll try and get to everything. Gary just asked if channel 1 is by type, then do you have to update 2 through 6?
No, you can update just channel 1, but in that case, you need to know the number. Like, if you update channel 1, it will update everything. But likewise, if you only update channel 2 in this example, you have to say by type. Otherwise, it will just update channel 2 discretely, and then you've broken the by type functionality.
Got it. And Lee asks if does the leader channel need to be in the range that you update?
No, it does not.
Great. Yeah. Cool. Jessica is asking for clarification. Because that dummy channel is by type, when you patch the other fixtures of the same type, they will automatically pull that same data, right?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. As soon as you patch new fixtures of something you have a by type palette for, their palettes are already filled. Yeah, that's the big advantage of this. So in a base show file, say your by types are in the 5,000s or whatever. If you're patching the show in the 1 to 1,000 range, as soon as you patch them, those palettes will populate.
Great. And Rick is asking if the console will find the fixture in the base show file and update the palettes as long as you use the update command.
As long as you're using the update and by type, which is the soft key.
Very good. Sorry, I'm reading this question.
Sure.
So this is Andrew's asking an organizational question, and maybe you'll cover this. But in moving ahead with different things like Edge, different gobos, things like that, are you making by type palettes for each of those parameters, or how are you dealing with by type palettes and breaking up those parameters across different targets like beam palettes, color palettes. Do you have any thoughts on that? Maybe the other gentleman as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, Abel or Jason, if you have any thoughts on that. I mean, it's just a organizational kind of opinion.
Yeah, that's something that I'll cover a little bit more in my show file, but I don't create soft beam palettes, but I will create a separate beam palette for, and I'll break everything up by a parameter where I'll have just the gobo selection, and I'll have whether it's indexing or rotating, or any other functionality of like the gobo, the prism, the animation wheel. And as far as like shutters go, it's any different combination of shutters I might normally use. It's all an individual beam palette for there graphically, so I can see it and knack it real quick.
Yeah, I think the other place that's good for bitype palettes is separating your mix color system from your chip color system. I think that's a pretty common thing of just separate palette structures for your options in those two.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep, very good. I think that's what we have for now. Why don't you go ahead and roll on, and
sure.
If other things come in. Also, we say this every time, but if you see us answering the question with an answered verbally, that's just a quick way for us to get that question out of our unanswered queue and out into the open. So it sounds a little dismissive, but that's what WebEx gives us as an option. So we're not trying to be mean. We're just trying to get the question out of our queue. So
it helps us stay organized. Yeah, for sure.
Thanks. So, all right. Thanks, Rob.
Yep. And then all the topics I'm going to cover today, at least, we have education center videos on them. So if you have more questions about how the logistics of how these things work, feel free to check those out on our webpage. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is macros. All right, so I am not going to sit here and tell you a bunch of specific macros that can often be a black hole of a conversation. Which is a good conversation, but I don't want this entire session to turn into this. We did a session a little while back on macros and magic sheets, which was really great. That really dived into some details on specific macros and how to write them. So I'm going to talk in more general terms, kind of concepts of how to include them. But the question that comes up a lot, which is a really fun discussion to have at the bar, is, well, what's your favorite macro? And without any other context, it's really hard to answer that question. Like, well, what are you doing? What's the scenario? What kind of shows it? What in what situation? So I'm gonna quote my good friend David Kane here and say my favorite macro is the one I need right now. And I had to clean this up a little bit to make it G-rated, but this you get the idea. It's whatever helps you in this second. So that is my favorite macro. And I'm going to fill in some blanks here that he may or may not have meant, which is again back to that let's be fast. I need this so that I can be fast, and we're not hearing what we're waiting on lights right here. So in general terms, macros can be extremely complicated, and sometimes that's great. I think Jason might show us a couple later on that I would put in that category. They can be really long, and that's if they serve their purpose, fantastic. But a lot of the macros that you will be able to take from show to show to show and use constantly are going to be pretty simple. Just a couple of buttons. You could even be 2 button presses, a combination of, or a single one, because it saves you from digging for a soft key or switching to another tab. So it doesn't. Macros don't have to be complex and confusing. They can be clear, sneak, enter. They can be select last, record next. They can be those sort of simple things that help you speed up. If you can shave a couple of seconds, if I can save 2 seconds every minute because of my macros, that adds up over the course of a work day. I'll beat this drum quite a bit today. So in general, I'm going to want my macros to be channel agnostic, meaning I don't ever want a channel number in a macro. So channels are incredibly important in EOS, obviously, but they're pretty much different from show to show to show. So unless you are in some sort of world where you define the channels at every gig you go to and you're able to keep them the same all the time, it's not going to be very helpful to have specific channel numbers in your macros, because you're constantly going to have to be going in there and editing them for the show you're on right now. And that's taking away time. So we want to create macros that aren't reliant on channels. And then be consistent. This is kind of a little one, but I find for editing, it can really be a good time saver. So what I mean by that, I've got a couple examples here. So here's a few macros that are inconsistent. So if you look over there, we have these are shutter control macros, and some of them go ACBD and some of them go ABCD. So if I'm looking at this as a batch and then I'm trying to edit them all, like if I want to just have A and C on a set of macros, if I'm copying them, it just slows me down because stuff isn't all in the same order. So even though it may be extra keystrokes in the macro to make it more clear and consistent, extra keystrokes inside a macro don't cost you any time. They all run instantly. So for the sake of your organization and editing later on, maybe consider an extra keystroke or two in your macro just to make it clear as you're looking at all your macros together. So here's an example of one that is more consistent. So the top one there lists all of the parameter categories, even though it doesn't necessarily need to. Like, it could just say stop effect enter. But because I put this with my individual stop effect, with my category stop effects, for me it was more clear to have those all spelled out, so I knew, oh, that's everything. So small example on that. So the most important thing, and this is kind of what I said at the beginning, is that it needs to work for you. It's not incredibly helpful for some, like if Jason just sent me all of his macros, I'd enjoy looking through his show file and kind of figuring out what he does, but I would have to spend some time doing that so that I understood what they did, how they work. Oh, this references this over here. So it's going to take a bunch of time for me to do that. So it's not immediately helpful to just have someone else give me a bunch of their stuff. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. We should certainly, communicate and share with other programmers if you want to, but it won't necessarily work for me. So I find, and I should have said this at the beginning, none of the show files we see today will be distributed. So I'll cut that question off. That's how I convinced these guys to help me. I said, you don't have to share your show files. So not that everyone has to build every piece of their show file from scratch. That's not what I'm saying either. But if you build it from scratch, you are going to understand the DNA of that show file a lot better than if you just take someone else's and try to adapt it. So in reality, a combination of those things is probably what most of us do, and that's the best way. But there's not going to be a secret sauce. If Abel just gives me his file, I'm not going to all of a sudden have all of Abel's skills and abilities because I have his show file. It's customized to him, and so is every programmer's. So these are kind of the key points you want to think about when you're setting up your macro organization. So when you go to write a macro or create a new macro, we can think about when do we need it, and to harken back to the David Kane quote, you need it right now. You always need it now. So when you're laying them out, either in your magic sheets or in your direct selects or on your console buttons, if you have those, however you set up your ability to recall macros, think about organizing them by topic or by when you're going to use them. So I've listed a bunch of kind of ideas here of how I might group my macros together. And I don't necessarily mean grouping them by macro number, although that can certainly come into play. I'm talking about grouping them in on a magic sheet together or on a bank of direct selects together. So for example here, I am never going to need my time code macros while I'm building palettes, probably. So it would not make sense for those to be mixed together. So think about logical banks of macros, and maybe you have a couple macros that you do need in multiple places. Just copy them, have them in both places. There's nothing wrong with that. So as we go, as you're building your file, just think about when you're going to need certain tools, how you're going to use them, what makes sense to have on the same screen at the same time, and what doesn't. So some macros, here we go, back to my suitcase analogy. Some macros are always going to come with you. You're just going to use them all the time. So like your toothbrush, you're gonna bring it on every trip. Some of them aren't necessarily. Maybe you're going to Hawaii, maybe you're going to the mountains. You're not going to need these certain tools on every single show you go to. Sometimes, one thing I like to do is I'll have a bank of blank macro buttons, and on whatever show I'm on, I might find that I'm doing something. Maybe a designer is constantly asking to do something that I didn't have a macro for. So I'll just build a macro real fast and throw it on that button. I already have a place to put it, and then when she says, "Oh, do this thing again," I've got a quick button for it instead of finding all those keys again. So I'll also do that when I'm doing a queue cleanup. Like sometimes I'm just doing something really repetitively. I'll just build it as a macro. I'm going to use it for 2 or 3 minutes and then never use it again. So you don't necessarily, once you write one, it's not in your show file. It's not carved in stone. If it's something real specific, then just delete it at the end of the show, or don't bring it to the next gig. Okay, so I'm going to move on to query, and then we'll take a question break after query. So query is, if you're not familiar with query, it allows you to select, it gives you a channel selection based on criteria that you set. And it will give you an error if your criteria didn't return anything. So query is an incredibly powerful tool that lets you not worry about channel numbers. Again, channels are extremely important in EOS, but that doesn't mean you have to memorize all the numbers or even think about all the numbers. So here's a couple examples of things that I might query. I just kind of made these up off the top of my head, but I might want to select all the lights downstage of the main drape so I can turn them off when the curtain comes in. I might need to select all my cyc lights. I might want everything on the third electric so that I can glow it for my electricians. And so yes, we can write these things in groups, and we can have groups at the beginning of a show. But a lot of times, a designer is going to ask, or we're going to need to select something that we hadn't thought of, to create a group. And that's where query can be really, really helpful. So one of the main basics of how we set up or how we get query to work for us is with the keywords in the text fields in the patch database. And I would suggest using very generic keywords because you can use those on every show. If you call something, front of house, you're going to have a front of house on pretty much every show probably. If you call something stage left train wagon, that's very show specific, and you can't really bring that with you because like, well, what did I mean by that? But if you call it something like stage left special or stage left, scenery, that's something a little more generic. So you're not constantly going in and changing all your keywords for show. It's sort of akin to channel numbers in macros. And then once we've set up our database, and I know we're going to look at this later in the show files, we can use query and maybe put that into a macro to utilize those keywords. And these are things that you can bring with you from show to show to show. If you have a query that says query front of house movers, and then in every show you populate your database with those keywords, then that macro is going to work every time. So some of this is about, so every show is going to have some work. I'm not saying your base show file is going to let you just sit down and start programming on any show, but if we look at how we can reference our data with a little bit of work on the front end per show, we can use the same macros that we're familiar with, the same magic sheets and layouts for every show. So just a quick query example, if you haven't used query before. So here's a shot of patch, and these will default, the columns on the right here, they're labeled lamp, position, and system. Those default to text 1, text 2, and text 3. You can rename them. So in this example, this is from our Education Center training. We've labeled the position and the system. So we have booms on both sides of the stage, and we have a head high and a shin system. And so without knowing any of these channel numbers or without thinking about them, I can say, okay, I want to grab all the stage right booms that are head highs. So I can query stage right booms head high, and the console will return a channel selection of 135 through 138. But I didn't have to know those numbers at all. I just had to make sure my database text fields were set up correctly at the beginning. And I can use this to build a group. I can make a macro that says this, however I want to interact with it. So there's a few, so universal macros are things that we can use no matter what. So this macro, which I also stole/borrowed from David Kane, is the lamp on macro. It does not rely on database fields. So it is possible to use query without populating your database. So this macro queries any discharge spot or yoke fixture that is patched. It turns it on. It goes into lamp controls and lamps it on. There's a couple different power ons here because he's built this for different fixtures. Some of them have the lamp on, some have the power 100. So no matter what fixtures he's got in his rig, you can use this. It turns them on. It waits for enter so you can see them on. And then when you hit enter, it sneaks them off. So this macro will work on any show, no matter what the fixtures are, without having to do any database entry. So most of the time, query is going to require some database text field management, but there are instances where you don't even need to do that for query to work for you. And then I've got one more. This harkens back to another study hall where I went off on using Park for moving lights, which anyone who knows me knows I'll do this like at the drop of a hat. So this is my macro to turn power on and off. And so it does require, here, let's get my little asterisk there. So it does require having custom fixtures. So it's basically the same as database. Like I'll have to merge those into my show too. But again, this will work for any fixtures that have those fixture type. So what this one does is it queries anything that has a relay that's off. It splits it into 4 groups, so I'm not bringing all my relays on at the same time. And I could make that be more groups if I had a giant amount of relays. And it goes through and it switches their fixture type to a relay on, which makes them power on. So again, almost universal. I just have to make sure that I have those custom fixture types in there, since those aren't built into the software. Okay, let's take a pause here and see what questions we got.
Yeah, Gary's asking, where in the console do you name the text fields?
Yeah, so in your patch database, if you select, and I don't have the software open, I can't share, sorry. So you select the field where it says just text 1, From a clear command line, select text 1 or whichever text field, and then hit label, and you can label it that way. And then on the command line will always show, here it is, will always show text 2, or whatever the text field is. It won't have your label, but that's helpful because you can relabel them if you need to move on, and your macros will still work. So in this, sorry, bounce around here. So in this example, like I said, position is text 2, system is text 3, and that's what's showing up on the command line, and that's what will be in your macro.
Very good. Tony has a Geo at 5 with the macro keys in the center or next to the monitor, 801 to 820. Is there a method for remembering what each macro does without having to use a direct select on the monitor?
I have a couple thoughts. Abel or Jason, you guys have any tricks for this one?
Code my macros on my Geo, that center panel, the 802 to 807, and I can change the color on the macro page, and you can make them green, red, white, and I just kind of color code them that way. And usually red is more like an effect stop or a stop something, and then like green is kind of like a go. And that's just kind of the way I mentally have it set in my head, where I just can hit that like I know that that's my hazer on, hazer off, or effect go, effect stop, that deal.
And then you just know hazer's the top row, or whatever.
Yeah, and I kind of already know like hazer and effect, and that's just the way I lay it out, and I can just tell by the color coding that I use.
Sure. Jason, any?
Well, yeah. There's also a file in the EOS Facebook group. It's an Excel template, I believe, that is properly formatted so that you can print it out to overlay on a Geo at 5 or an EOS TI, so you can label all your buttons and just tape that piece of paper right there on your console. Everything's labeled there for you. I don't do that, and I'm normally on a Geo at 5 as well. I actually duplicate that button bank onto an external screen so that I can either hit the physical buttons, or I can hit those off on any other screen. It's always a pain I have, because that's something I'm always going for.
Well, and I just like to say, like the panels, the macros on that center, the way I like to use those for, like what you're saying is like my quick macros that I use right away. Like I have one as a snapshot that takes me back to my main screen. And then I have just like haze on, haze off, things that I'm always using. So I don't really mess with those. Those are just kind of my permanent ones that I use every show that I have. So I kind of already just memorized that. That's my snapshot. That's my haze off, haze on. That's an effect stop, and so on like that.
No, and that's exactly kind of the point of a base show file, is you use it all the time, so you're not relearning it from show to show. If I'm sitting down at this console today, this button is haze on. It's right here. It's always here. So that's a great tie into the main idea of this is you want to build this in such a way that you don't have to think about it too much, because then you just react. It's there, haze off. You don't have to remember, oh, which page is it on? So, yep. Thanks, guys. Great answers. Anything else, Nick?
That is all we have had come in for now, so why don't we truck forward?
Okay. I hope I didn't scare people by saying don't ask about macros. So usually it's a giant can, but we'll see some real life ones in just a little bit here. Maybe that'll spark some more discussion. Okay, so let's move on to snapshots. So the main thing, I think we all know what snapshots are. I'm not going to start at the very beginning. So the main thing I want to cover here is if you are recording them or on a console with fewer or less monitors than you're going to play them back on. Just talk about some ways to deal with that. So by default, the console, if I record something on a console with 3 monitors and then I play it back on a console with 2 monitors, all those tabs are going to be there, but they're sometimes squished and in weird places, and you're like, why did it do this? So that can be a big time suck sometimes if you call a snapshot that you think you're ready to go and like, oh no, it's not. I have to rearrange and move tabs and stuff. So in an effort to mitigate that, we're going to talk about a couple strategies. So if you are building it on a console or on Nomad, and you're going to a system, you're going to a system with fewer monitors, that one's pretty easy. So if you're building it on your Geo with 2 external monitors, so you have 4 total, and you're going to be running this on an Ion with only 2 monitors, all you have to do is when you're recording your snapshots is deselect those monitors that you don't want to record. You may want to make sure you might want to have those monitors empty to kind of simulate the situation you're going into. But when you record the snapshot, you just uncheck those monitors and you're good to go. So that's kind of the easy way to do it. If we are doing the opposite, if we are going from a system with 2 monitors and we know we're going to be moving on to a system with 4 monitors, for example, and we want to kind of pre-build our snapshots to be ready for that more monitor system, there's two strategies. So the first one is to build multiple single monitor snapshots. So I think this is an unknown or underutilized, at least, feature of the console. So on the tab selection screen toward the bottom, there's a ribbon with single monitor snapshots, and there's a plus sign at the beginning. It looks a lot like the Magic Sheet navigation ribbon. And what this lets you do is set up a monitor, any monitor, and into multiple frames or multiple tabs, however you want to do it. And then you click on that button, and it will store just that monitor as a snapshot here on this ribbon. And then what you can do is you can play that snapshot back on any other monitor. So the strategy, say you're building it on an Ion with 2 monitors, and you need to go to a 4 monitor, is you could build 4 separate single monitor snapshots on your 2 monitor Ion, and then once you get to your system with more monitors, you could load those all up and then record a new snapshot with everything. So it does add a little time on the back end there, but it does allow you to set it up instead of guessing what stuff's going to look like or starting from scratch on your larger monitor setup. And then the other way is with Nomad. So in the shell of Nomad, there is a pull down to let you select how many windows you have. And I didn't do a screenshot of this. I'll just talk about it. So we can set this to be however many monitors you are going to have. So I could set this to be 4, and then there's going to be 4 separate windows in your Nomad software. And the key here, this is what I didn't take a picture of. The key here is to pay attention to the monitor number, which is in the top right corner. Let's see here. I'm gonna go somewhere else just so I can point it out. So in the top left corner here, so I have my 3 workspaces. So I'm on workspace 1, but in the very top left corner it says 1, and that's my monitor number. So on consoles with built-in hardware, the right-hand monitor is always monitor number 1. That's with your CIA, and then the left-hand monitor is always monitor 2. The external monitors you can remap, and those tools are found also in the tab selection screen called monitor mapping. So when you build a snapshot, whatever is on monitor 1 is going to play back on monitor 1. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to a console with internal monitors, 1's always on the right, 2's always on the left. Let me back to where we were here. Okay, so the other thing, or another thing to pay attention to, is your record options when you're storing a snapshot. So this is the default options that I'm showing here on the screen. I tend to uncheck favorite. So favorite is the snapshot pop-up in the top right corner. So it's on by default, but that means every snapshot you store is going to be on that pop-down. So I tend to uncheck that, and then I go back and select ones that I want to be up there, so I can just keep that area clean, personal preference. So here's an example of only storing the visible workspaces, so we're not affecting the direct selects. And then here's an example of only affecting the direct selects. Actually, visible workspaces should have been unchecked there. So this is a good practice to remap your direct selects. Most of the time again, this is very personal preference, but I don't want my my macros that change my tabs to have any effect on my direct selects, because I might have those on a separate page than I started, and I've got them just how I want them. So I don't want every snapshot to be messing with those. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, but it's good to know that these options are here so you can use them to your advantage. And then the last one here is partial monitor snapshots. So this is, I think, again, this is pretty common. So on this example, the snapshot direct selects that are highlighted here on the left, those only control this frame. Nothing else will change. And then these only control this frame. So whatever navigation system you want to come up with, whether it's Magic Sheets or direct selects or different snapshots, is great. If it works for you, it's what it needs to be. And then how to record these is to simply uncheck the other frames in here. So again, I think most people are familiar with this. So I'm not going to go too far into it. Nick, I see, let's go ahead and pause here for questions. I see we've got a couple there before we go on to the last section.
Yeah, absolutely. Jessica's wondering about that lower ribbon, and is it always for single monitor snapshots?
That one? I believe so. You may be able to answer that more intelligently than I can. And then, Nick, you'd mentioned maybe expanding on what's going on under the hood. Did you want to get into that now, or save that for later?
I can talk about this, and then we can talk about you're going to talk about custom direct selects more, or?
I was going to leave that to you since it might be changing. I heard a rumor.
Yeah. So yes, the ribbon that's at the bottom there is going to create and show you single monitor snapshots. And that, exactly as Rob said, the intent of that is for you to be able to take just the monitor you're on, quickly create a snapshot of it, and be able to recall that on any other monitor in any other place. So that ribbon is useful for that. Yeah. We'll answer this other question as well. Joe asks if you have a Nomad connected to the console in client mode, would that give you an extra monitor? Do you want to kind of talk about that?
Sure. So in a sense, yes, it does, but it is a separate. Well, you can have it either be the same user or its own user. So by default, the snapshots, if it's the same user, that snapshot will affect it. If it's a different user, it won't. But you can also have the ability to have snapshots point at specific users or specific devices. So you can, and now I'm doubting myself, by default, will a snapshot affect, if they're the same user, will it affect the outside client, Nick?
Yep.
Yes, okay. So effectively, yes, as long as they're set up as the same user. You could use that basically as another monitor. And then you could also,
from a base show file standpoint, and the idea that maybe we're going to be moving around or doing things, I think having a macro that calls a snapshot on another device is gonna be pretty flexible, right? So that you can move that space-to-face menu, and then really all you have to do is change your device target potentially.
Oh. Great.
Do we want to talk about direct selects here? Do we want to talk about that?
Yeah, why don't we? Because we're about to move into effects, so why don't we? I think it makes more sense to do it here.
Yeah, when we were getting this set up, Rob and I were chatting. One of the things custom direct selects are really, really useful for base show files because you can set things up exactly how you like them, as Rob and Abel and Jason were saying. You can sort of muscle memory where things are going to be. And the way that we deal with custom direct selects right now is we give you one custom direct select slot to, and then if you want to change what that mapping is, you have to use a snapshot, right? We store that mapping in a snapshot. Those of us who have used custom direct selects have accidentally wiped out our direct select mapping before, to much disappointment, and several four-letter words. We are starting work on EOS 3.1 software, and one of the features that will be included in that is making custom direct selects their own thing, right? So you'll be able to store multiple custom direct select maps and have the ability to more easily manage and change those like you do with other targets. So that's coming. We just started work on it. It's a ways away, but know that it is being worked on as we speak. So more exciting stuff to come on that. And I think it was worth sharing because that's becoming a more fundamental part of how people lay out their desks, particularly for base show files. So we're working on it. More to come.
Great. And then I saw one more question. I'm pulling up EOS just so I can show it. Do you mind just reading that while I get
so
away here?
So everybody can hear. Jessica asks what the keystrokes would be to call up a snapshot on a different device. So Rob's going to open up Nomad and show you real quick.
Yeah, let's see if this works here. There we go. So I may have misled you a little bit. So this can be done through a macro, not through the snapshot directly. So we will need to put the snapshot into a macro. And I got a file here they call snapshot one. And within the macro, I have the option to do a target device. And I've got my soft keys on a different screen. But I can say, I have a soft key that says target, so I'm going to press that. And I need to see here. Let's do this. Sorry, guys. Let's make this better. Let's share the other screen. There we go. So I've hit macro one target, which was my soft key. Here, I'll show that. All right, so macro one target is a soft key, and I can choose a device or a user. So a device is going to be a specific piece of hardware on your network. So right now I only have my computer on my network, but I could also pick this TI or the Backstage Ion, based on that device name, and it's going to always send it to that device no matter what user that device is. Or I have the option to target a user, and I can put in any user number here, or I can say I can target all users except me, only the backup console or only the master console. So these are great for your base show file because even though the name of the Ion that's your backup console might change from show to show, these will be much more portable. So if just to give an example, I did a show where there were a couple stage managers that had clients for queue lists, and so I made them both be the same user, and I had some macros that would target that user. So anytime they needed their screen got off, or they needed a reset, I could just fire that one macro, and it would take care of both of them. So that's an example of when you might use a user. You might use a device if you know that that's your other programmer, that's your designer, and you want to make sure that the snapshot in this case, or whatever the macro is, goes to that specific device. So again, it's under a macro screen, and it can be any macro. It doesn't have to just be snapshots, but super useful for snapshots. Okay. Looks like that is all, so I'm going to keep going if I can find where I was here. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is effects. And again, I'm not going to write any specific effects here, just like macros. I'm going to talk in more general terms about some best practices and rules to think about when you're creating effects that you want to be able to bring from gig to gig. So again, we want to be channel agnostic because for the same reasons we want to in our macros. It's more than likely those channels are going to change. I'm sure there's exceptions to this, but as a general rule, a step effect filled with channels not going to be super useful in a base show file. I'm not saying they're not useful at times, but as far as a portable tool, not so much. Consider what is in that effect. So effects can reference a lot of things. They could have, intensities like 0 and full. That's going to be very portable. As long as your fixtures on your next gig have intensity, those will work just fine. When it comes to anything else, so I've got a couple color examples here. So the one on top, so these are both absolute effects. They're not step effects. So the one on top is referencing palettes. So it's referencing a red palette, a green palette, and a blue palette. So it's going to that palette and then background state, green, background state, blue, background state. So this is pretty portable, but I do have to make sure that my fixtures have data in those palettes. So again, this is all starting to tie together. So if I had by type palettes and I've used these fixtures before and I have them in those palettes, I'm good to go. The effect on the bottom does not use palettes. It just references specific parameters. So this one, I could bring this effect with no other palettes, no other information into any venue, and as long as those fixtures have red, green, and blue parameters, it's going to run on it immediately. The disadvantage to the bottom one, the second one, is that it's only controlling the red parameter. So on the top one, I might know that, well, on this fixture, when I want red, I actually need a little bit of blue in it. And so that information is contained in my palette. I don't have that flexibility on the bottom one. So these are both fine ways to do this. Just know that your effects, if they're referencing outside information, you'll have to make sure that outside information, those palettes, are also up to date on any given show. So the fewer effects you have to manage and organize, the quicker you're going to be able to find the one you need. So I've got an example here of a couple ways. So these are all color effects again. So let's look at this one. So this is, in this example, let's say I have 10 color palettes and I want to have effects for all of them. So this effect is a 2-action. It's a red over cyan. Okay, that's okay, but if I want to make effects for all 10 color palettes, then I'm going to need 90 effects to include all my color palettes, 10 times 9, because I probably won't have red over red. That wouldn't make much sense. But I'll need one for red over orange, one for red over yellow, one for red over green. And then I'll have to start all over and have orange over red, orange over yellow, orange over green. So that's just for one type of, that might be my burst effect. And then I still need a set of these for ramp effects, for pulse effects, whatever I want to create. So this will add up, this will multiply very quickly into a ton of effects that I now have to lay out and put on magic sheets. So the better way to do this would be to do, if I do a color palette over a background state, now I only need 10 effects instead of 90 to do essentially the same thing. I have to choose a background color, but I've already got my palette, so that's not hard. So I've gone from 90 per effect style down to 10. So that's cool. And then my last one here, I was telling the guys before we started here, I spent an embarrassing amount of time last night looking for motorized luggage because it's really ridiculous. But we can also do a palette, I just called it effect color here, over background. And then if we have a system, and I believe in our effects video series, David King goes into this, the concept of this system to copy other colors into this effect, or excuse me, into that palette. So now instead of 90 or instead of 10 effects, I have one effect. I still have to modify the palette, but basically by changing what's in that palette, I don't have to have a whole slew of effects. So it's different ways to manage your data. If you can, and I think this is true throughout your whole file, if you can do the same thing with fewer targets, that's usually a good thing because that's less you have to sift through to find what you're looking for. Okay, that was all I had on effects. Have any? I've got a few parting shots before I turn it over to Abel and Jason. I don't see any questions now, so I'll go ahead and keep moving, and we'll take a big pause at the end here for that. So once you have your show file, you've got it, you're good to go. How do you take that and move from venue to venue? So I already talked about at the beginning how it's constantly going to be evolving. It's never done, and that's great. We're going to keep learning and improving as new features come in. You may or may not want to incorporate those. We didn't talk about augmented today, at least I didn't. These guys may, but I'm really interested to see how our group of programmers start to find ways to incorporate augmented tools into their base show files. So just a couple other thoughts at the end here. Merging, extremely important. How do you bring things from one file into another file? How do you bring things from your base show file into the show you're working on? Lots of different schools of thought here, but like I've alluded to a little bit with the lamp on or the relay macro that required fixture type. So I can't just merge in that macro. I have to also merge in my fixtures. With the effects, I can't necessarily merge in the effects in a vacuum. I may need the palettes that go with them. So just think about the relationship between those different targets in the console. It's kind of like if you open up a magic sheet only, but you don't have any palettes or cues or anything else, it's not going to be very functional. You need all that other stuff on the back end to make it work. And then once you're doing a show, think about what you're going to keep. So meaning, if you've made some changes to this show, so let's say with bi-type palettes, you've tweaked your red color palette for a certain fixture on this show. Is that something you want to keep forever and you like this new red for that fixture, so that's what you're going to use moving forward? Or was that just a change you made for today and you'd rather go back to how it was before? That's not a right answer, but you need to be cognizant of those kind of decisions and find a way to stay organized so that when you go to the next gig and you're like, oh man, I wish I had that other red again, you're not digging through show files trying to merge it in. So in the heat of battle, often there's not time for this kind of thing, but just keep it in the back of your head as far as what you want to dump at the end of the night and what you want to keep for next time to improve that. And then just kind of my final bit of advice is, and I've hammered this home quite a bit, but this isn't something you're going to do in a day and be done. It's something that's going to continually evolve and get better. When you talk to other programmers about it, Abel and Jason were both at our Q conference last time, and so much of the conversation at that event with them and with other attendees and our guest lecturers was about base show files, tools you can bring. There was a lot of conversation and awesome sharing of files and just ideas, and that's how we all get to where we are. So don't, if this is intimidating to you, it's, we all started there at some point, and it's something that we just do a little at a time. Don't feel like if you don't have a base show file today, don't feel like this is you're a failure if you have to go make one. It's something that start small and work up to it, and talk to other people, ask questions, and that's how we all learn and get better. Okay, any other questions here before I turn it over to our guests?
A couple of things have come in. Ben would like to know how you change the color in the effects color change, and that was a series of macros and things, right?
Yeah. So in that video series, David had a magic sheet, but basically you're copying whatever color palette you pick into that color palette. So you're just always overwriting it with something else. So you're not moving your color palettes because then you end up losing them over time, but you're just copying over that effect color palette.
Copy that. Lee brings up the new effects variables. How about using a variable rather than color effects one color palette?
So I will be completely honest and say that I have not played with that set of features yet. It's definitely on my list to get in there. So that's a great example of stuff in 3.0 that might be really great for base show files. So Nick, I don't know if you can cover my inability here and talk about that for a minute.
I'm in the same boat. Like, I don't think many people have been able to be in production with that feature set. So I think it'll be interesting to see how people use it. I think it's still something you need to manage, right? So the way that variables work, you can put the variable in the effect, but it may actually end up being more management because you have to manage that variable on a per queue basis now or a per instance basis. So yeah, I think we'll see as people try it out whether that's something that will fit into people's base show files or not. But good question, Lee.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. Lee says, I think it would work well on a queued show, but less so in busking. Lee, I think you're right. I think that's what we'll find out with it. So Sean works in a school, and the base file is their responsibility, but the students do a lot of the programming, so they're not always aware of what changes have been made. Is there a way to compare files to see what has changed or what's different? How would you go about that?
Abel might have a good answer for this. You're sort of in a similar situation where you have a base show file that other people are using without your supervision. There's not a way in the console to do like a side-by-side and see, other than opening it up on Nomad and going through, that I can think of. So, Abel, do you have a strategy for that? Do you always just dump it when they're done? Or
so that's what I do. Like, once I let someone kind of mess around with my show file, I just reload mine after they're gone. Usually what I'll do, I'll look at it, and if I see anything that I like, I'll take that, and then I'll just merge. So like same with merge, I'm really good at merging. I'll take stuff and just merge it to my show file, even if it doesn't quite work, but at least I can kind of tweak it once it's in my show file. But yeah, I just always upload mine back up and then just go back to zero, basically go back to mine.
Sean, if you need more clarification, go ahead and feel free to ask some more questions in there. I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but there's not really a way to see what has changed between two files.
Jeff Mabry. Hello, Jeff Mabry. As someone who sets up systems for other users, are there any items that you would recommend for all base show files? I think that's a good discussion point.
Ooh. Yeah, I can start. I would say, and I know, Jeff, you're doing a lot of high schools, middle schools, so I would say maybe a simple magic sheet, because again, it's going to be user specific, but think about if it's a high school, there's going to be students. Simple is going to be better. Obviously, we don't want piles of complex macros. Maybe some basic color palettes that are going to be in there if they've got LED fixtures. I'm not sure. It's so personal. I don't know if there's. I think the answer is no. There's not one thing that is great for all users. But if you can narrow it down, like I know you are in your situation of, say, all high schools, I think there probably are some things. Any other thoughts from my panel on that?
also a good place to start in general for anyone that's like kind of starting off building a base show file is don't start off with all the crazy macros, but actually start off with the presets and palettes. Like figure out what lights you have and what the color palettes you need are, what the beam palettes that you may need if you have pictures with beam attributes, and same thing with focus, but kind of build a place to store all of that information. So like the high school goes and hangs another show, if they're able to move around moving lights and such, build that focus grid so that they can go ahead and like work on updating where all their lights need to point to, and that make sure their gobos are all available. You know, it might be good to build that one magic sheet that has that kind of basic information so that regardless of their skill level, they can kind of get behind the console and I want the light to point right over there. I want it to have that gobo. Something simple like that.
Yeah, and that's what I have actually. When we get to my show file, you'll see I have a basic magic sheet that I always use, and it's my main magic sheet, and it's kind of broken down like that. Where since I'm in a red plot and we kind of nothing really changes too much in my venue, my LEDs, these are your basic color. My Vipers, these are your basic color, and these are the basic beam palettes and like the focus palettes. So someone can just come in and hit the Viper and turn it green, and that's like ultimate green. That's all it is. And if you want to play with it, you can go to the color page and stuff like that. So I have a basic magic sheet that just quick selects and takes you straight to it.
And then I had one more thought, Jeff, for you, which is some snapshots for people who may not understand the tab system. If you have buttons that say patch, queue list, color picker for everybody, I think those will be pretty useful. And then maybe those snapshots call direct selects with the snapshots there for navigation. So some simple things to help people start to learn to get around the desk might be pretty universal in those situations.
Something else that might help there also is to go through your palettes and presets, and the ones that are specific labeled Viper gobos, go ahead and lock those so they can't get updated over. Kind of secure them off so that when you're in a high school and you have a freshman coming in the theater sitting behind the lighting console, they're not overwriting the base file.
Points out that a snapshot with just some basics, a quick get back to safety, that's a really good thing. I think certainly at lower ends of the market, people feel like they can get lost in the software. So having that snapshot that just gets them to a known state is always a good thing as well. So good point on that, Andrew.
Yep.
I mean, I have that too. So.
Yeah.
Because I get lost in the software daily, in fact. Cool. Thank you all. A couple of things. I'll answer this one because there's a couple of questions that come in about in a future version of software allowing a show file to be protected or locked. So right now we don't allow you never write over a show file, right? Because we add the date and the timestamp into the show file name when we save it. You're always just saving iterative copies. So one of the things that I know a lot of people do is they will, when they're ready to reload, they'll just find that early copy and they'll load that copy and then they're back to square one. And I'm sure, Abel, you do that like nearly weekly. And so that kind of exists a little bit. One of the things that's been on the list for a very, very long time and that we will get to one of these days eventually is a thing called security logins. And security logins is going to be our way of allowing you to set up login accounts with passwords, to have an administrator in the system, and allow each of those accounts to have different permissions. So that will be the long-term answer to saying, me as the admin, I can re-record over these queues or make changes. Me as the electrician, I only have access to patch. Or me as a student at a high school, I can play stuff back and poke around all I want, but I can't record anything. So that's a long-term feature, and we will get to it one of these days. No date, no year. So that's that. And Joe asks a follow-up. When saving, does it save everything or only changes? Every time we save a whole show file. So you get everything, you can load that, and it is the state of that show file at the moment that you're saving it. So you're good to go there. And I know a lot of venues, in fact, that are doing like long-running shows still delete all of the tech copies and only leave the final copy of the show file, so that you don't accidentally load something that is too far back and incomplete. Cool. So Joe also asks, regarding the earlier question, can Nomad be used as a third screen for an ion, or will it be Nomad 1 when recording and recalling snapshots? Do you want to take that, Rob, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I think I can answer that. So it is going to have its own monitor number. It's not going to be monitor number 3. So I'm actually, Nick, does this have to do with how we save versus playback snapshots?
Yeah, so basically right now we're not allowing you to use a second piece of hardware to extend multiple monitors. It's something that we've talked about for a long time, the idea that you could designate like a laptop and make it behave like a third monitor for your console. There have been a lot of technological hurdles for that, but in 3.0 we released augmented tether, and so that kind of opened the door for us to start looking at that again as a possibility. So again, no commitments on development time, but right now you're always going to be treating that as a separate device. It's a network device. We don't know that it's connected to that ion, so you have to manage a lot of that on your own with snapshots and targeting devices with macros and things like that, like Rob showed you. In the future, we'd like to find a way to make that more seamless. So stick with us. We know that it's a thing that people want, and we'll see when we can bring it in through development. Cool. Robert asks if there's a repository somewhere with some examples of some of these things that folks have created. And he also asks if we know whether the David Kane busking show file was made available. And I don't know that off the top of my head, Rob. Do you remember that?
No, I'll look that up right now. I can't remember either.
Yeah, and I'll say for a repository, the best place, honestly, there's an EOS family programmers Facebook group, which has, 13,000 members now. That's kind of the place where stuff shows up. Also on our forum, there is a place for macros and magic sheets, so feel free to go look there. But that's the official ETC sponsored one. But if I'm being honest, everybody on the Facebook group is a lot more active there. So you'll probably get more results from that place. And Brad says that David released the show file on that Facebook group. So that is where it's located. So that's good to know. The Facebook page, Joe, if you search, what is it? EOS Family, ETC EOS Family Programmers Group?
Yeah. ETC EOS Family Console Programmers.
I'll post this.
I've got the link right here if you want.
Yeah.
Something else that comes up on the group a lot is that there is a nice little search function on the group, because quite often the same questions get asked over and over again. So for show files, I would check out there's a file tab as well. And there's a handful of show files and magic sheet icons and all that kind of stuff buried there. But if you search show file, you might be able to find a handful of these show files we're talking about right now in the group.
Oh, I see your @5 macro button label spreadsheet there too.
Yep.
Oh, Quentin posted that. Okay. That makes sense.
Yep.
Tony says when he was out at Q, he learned from Ziggy, one of our guest lecturers, to record one of each group with all of your dummy channels to help with palette building and updating, which is a very smart tip.
For sure.
Cool. That's all the questions. Do we want to turn our friends loose?
Yeah. So thanks for sitting with us, guys. It's finally your turn. I'll shut up. So we're going to start with Abel from Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I'll let him introduce himself a little bit. I've had the pleasure of hanging out with him in Santa Fe a few times, as well as in Madison at Q. So he's going to show us his show file. Take it away, Abel. Oh, I need to give you. Yes. I need to click that button so you can show us. There we go.
Okay. Let's see. We good there, right?
Yep. Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So my name is Abel Sepulveda. I'm the lighting supervisor at the Lenses Performing Arts Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We're a pretty small venue, about 800 seats. We're a roadhouse, so we do every types of gigs. We do rock and roll, jazz fest, dance, from touring to local companies, ballet, modern. We do lectures, we do symphonies, orchestras. We do film festivals, and of course a little bit of light theater. So I have a repertory plot always up. So most of the time people just kind of use that plot because what we're doing is just day in, day out type gigs. So my show file is kind of based more on my actual house things. So just kind of like what Rob was going over was that I am kind of channel heavy, and I do rely on that. And I do speak to a lot of the designers that come in beforehand and be like, hey, you want to use all these palettes and these effects, like my LEDs already in these channels and everything's kind of there. So they kind of work with me and they would just adjust with that. But other than that, I can just show you guys around. For me, I find it, I have a Geo, just so everybody knows. I have my console I use is a Geo, and I have the 2 monitors on the console, and then I have 2 exterior monitors that are touchscreen based that I use a lot. And to me, the layout is really important, the way I use it. The screen right now is obviously the Tombstone and the playback. I have that on one of my screens on the right side. And then on my actual Geo screens, I set up my palettes like this. I'm a big Snapshot user and macros, and I can go over some of those. And then I have, of course, my group palettes, and then I have effect palettes. And the other screen, I have like my color palettes and some beam palettes and focus palettes, and those are always on my Geo screens. And then my main thing, what we're talking about is I'm a big Magic Sheet user, and this is my simple Magic Sheet that I use that I have on for everybody so they can come in and use. It's pretty laid out, pretty colorful, and pretty simple for people to see it and be able to use it right away. I have groups on the left-hand side that are basically laid out to my red plot, and they're just suggestions. And of course, like what Rob was saying before and all that, like these are stuff that I use all the time. So I know like group 1 through 4 is like a front wash system that I always use in the same channels and all that. And my part cans are there on my overhead electrics, and I have my high sides that I'm constantly using on my electrics, and they're all labeled there, and I can just select them right away. Lighting designer in here that wants to do something else, I just overwrite, right? Or if they're console, I'm just like, you can use these groups. If you want to just record a group really quick, just go ahead and use those. And then down here, just like, I want to add a channel or change something, and they can just record it, because then I'll just bring back my show file afterwards when they're done. Then, of course, I divvied up my intelligence stuff that I have. I have the Vipers. I have 4 Mac Vipers. I have a couple of LED par cans, Wibron, and I got 8 Mac Auras in the building. And those are always pretty much in the same positions and stuff like that. So people can just kind of come here and just grab those. And you can see that I have different kind of groups dividing them in different ways. So if they just want to use 1 or 2 of them, or 3 and 4, or odds and evens type deal, like inside and out, they can just select those. And underneath of all of them is just the basic color palettes for them that I've created. And these different color palettes are just the basics, right? So when they hit blue, that's like all blue, all like the color wheel and everything. Everything else is at 0, blue's at max. Same thing with the green, same thing with the red. That's just like the primary colors, so people can just jump at them and see those lights at their fullest red, green, or blue or stuff like that. And I busk a lot too, so you'll see a lot of effect stop macros and a bunch of effect macros that just launches things, because I busk a lot of rock and roll and jazz shows. So I use a lot of those macros to just launch effects for me. And that's what this table over here is for. I have the simple macros of lamp on and lamp off. I have a lot of macros where it's just a lot of the simple stuff that I take everywhere, and have like up here in the top corner, you can see that I have just like the simple macros of recording a cue, recording a group, recording a sub, recording a color, beam, focus, intensity, presets, even just a clear all and like a quick save. Those are all quick buttons, but when I have like the Chinese acrobats in and there's like a language barrier, or I have like the Brazilian dancers in and they're lighting person, there's the Portuguese language barrier. I can just show them that and they'll see it right away and they're like, oh, okay, and they can just set a look and then just hit that button without having to look through the console if they're not familiar with the console. And that's just like a quick way of just getting the show quickly programmed. You can see that I have a bunch of snapshots up here, and this is just like my main ones. This always gets me to what I need, and the way I lay them out is if someone hits like the color snapshot here, it'll take you to this screen where I pretty much have everything open already, so they can kind of just see how things look. And of course, everything's laid out in 4 screens, so this is a little difficult because it's just one screen that we're seeing. But the way I record snapshots is like for everything. And if I kind of click on the snapshot up here, you can kind of see like on my color base, like one window will have what you're seeing over here, like the color picker and the color path and all that. And then on one screen, you can see that I have the color palettes. So if someone likes a color, it's just easily to record over to a palette right away, and they can see what's empty and what they can just record into. And then I have the editor open as well. And it just goes around like that. So all my snapshots are just full windows. Like my Submaster snapshot, it just takes me directly to the fader config. It takes me to the sub editor. So everything's open. So if you need to make a quick change or something, everything just opens up and you can see everything. And that's just more like if you don't use these things that much and then you sometimes forget, like, oh, like how do I get to like the spectrum on that color? I already have it open. So when you hit the snapshot to go to color, you'll see it. So that's one of my quickest ways. I'm a big snapshot user. So when someone says, oh, I need to go to the color picker, I just hit my snapshot and everything colored technically on the console is open in all the windows, and I can just make the quick adjustments that I need to, and then we can move on type deal. I've also created the rep plots in Magic Sheets. So you can see that this is my overhead electric rep plot that is always like this unless they need to really make some changes. And this is, again, just a quick way for someone that's coming into my venue and needs to pick a new light or wants to see something. And again, the language barrier, when I have people internationally coming through, they can just look at this. It's touchscreen. It's all one-to-one, so they know that, hey, I'm not using that light. They can already see the dimmer number on there, and they can just turn it on that way too. Or if they need to change the patch, they can just look it up right there without me always having to be right there. They know that they can pop into this window, and they can see like, oh, like I'm not using this channel. I can select that and use it. And I have a couple of them. This is like my front of house layout, and then my shell for my symphonies and stuff like that. And of course, I have all these on snapshots as well, so people can just select the snapshots. Like over here, like I have the Lensic front of house, the Lensic overhead. I have my pixel maps and then patch. And when I went to ETCQ the first time, that was something that really was taught to us, was just eliminating keystrokes, right? It seems a little silly, but in reality, eliminating some keystrokes makes you go faster. And for me, the snapshots are the fastest way for me to do that, because I don't have to go into displays or I have to go color or effect. I can just hit those snapshots and I'm there, and I can go ahead and do what I need to do. So yeah, so that's kind of some of my quick basic stuff that I have on my sheet that I use. This is another magic sheet that I create for the circus that we have every year in our theater. And this, you can see, is built more for me. But I kind of have a bunch of groups and then color palettes, more effects and stuff like that on there. And I steal a lot from here when I have a bigger show in, because I leave more of my effects here than the main one. I have smaller effects here. And a lot of this stuff too, what Rob was talking about, is non-channel based. So this is just for everything. These can make, and these are the ones the consoles comes with, and these are some of the random chases that I've made that are just intensity, so they can work on non-intelligent lighting as well. the ones inside this box are more channel related, so that's why they're separate, because these will launch specific effects for the auras or the LEDs, or even effects stopping them in a different percentage and stuff like that. Most of the people I come in don't really like blackouts, so when I'm busking, I have to sometimes hit an effect stop, and sometimes when you do that, everything will turn off if you're running on not on intensity, if you have things on your faders. I also use my fader wing a lot. I do have, I didn't bring that up. I have a 40 fader wing attachment as well. So I have my 10 submasters and then my 40 fader wing. A lot of the times on the 10 submasters on my console, I always have like work lights, house lights, simple stuff, front of house, quick wash on there, like quick washes on there for people. I leave those constantly like that. Also, when I'm not in the building, currently I am the only lighting person in the building. So when I'm not here, and my TD needs to come in and turn on the console and use something, he's not to adapt to the system. So I just leave those submasters right away for someone to be able to come in and just, hey, I just need a quick wash on stage because we're going to record something really quick, or we're going to have a quick meeting or something. We need lights on. That's a way that he knows how to just jump on there and turn on a submaster. So I always have those 10. The ones on my fader wing, though, I always have my beam palettes and focus palettes on those, because I just kind of move my auras around like that, or my Vipers, and anyone who comes into the building, I kind of set up like that, and they kind of see it like, hey, the Vipers, you can move them to the house, you can move them to this position, you move this position, and then you can bring this fader up and it'll go to this gobo or this beam palette. And that's just kind of like the quickest way for them to kind of see it. And then if we need to make any changes, we can record it like that as a beam palette separately. But yeah, so everything to me is just kind of laid out in a very clear, fast, obvious way. And all of this is also when I'm using Nomad, I find it a lot easier to just kind of sit on the screen and I can just type here, because I run everything on Mac, and the Mac controls are always a little different from the PC, even the shortcuts. So I sometimes just use my magic sheet so I can just record, and that's why I have these quick snapshots and quick macros, simple macros, because instead of like looking for like, oh, how do you record a focus palette again or color and all that, I just hit that button and it's already there. So I'm not jumping around, and you avoid using this panel less as well. So that's just kind of my quick base show file that I use. And these are things that I kind of take with me when I do leave. I take a lot of this layout. I do have more macros that I'll include for myself when I'm taking this out somewhere else, and my snapshots. Those are like the two things that I cherish the most for my programming sense, is my snapshots and my macros. The quickest and simplest ones to just get you going right away. And then I always have groups that I kind of use. And like, again, I'm a rep house, so to me everything's channel based because we don't really change things too much. And the few times that we do, I just change something on mine. I just like add it here again, and then I'll just upload my other show file. So yeah.
Great. That's awesome. Thanks, Abel. I think it's a really great example of a show file that's built for a venue. That can really support multiple levels of users. Like you were saying, with language barrier and people who aren't familiar with the console, set up really nicely for your purpose, which is exactly what I was saying. Like, if it works for you, then it's correct. So Nick, what questions do we have coming in for Abel?
We have a couple of questions specifically for Abel, and I think a couple that'll be good for panel discussion for later. Most importantly, Abel, who is Dr. Dog?
Dr. Dog's my favorite band, and when I go to my lock screen, this is I saw them live. I've seen them live a few times, and I took these photos, and I really liked them. So when I lock my lock screen, I created magic sheets of these images. So when I shift the escape to lock it, I go to this magic sheet and I shift lock, so people don't read or see what's on my screen. And actually, it's just more for me too, because when I'm labeling things, I sometimes, since most of the time I don't know people's names or I don't know what's really happening, and then I have like a cue list, and sometimes I'll just be like, little kid with the hat, or Sometimes I just do like some funny queuing lists for me, so I know what's going on. Like if I don't even know what's happening in the show, and I can just, just write a quick little, like my queuing list format is kind of sometimes jokingly, and I just do this so no one gets offended or sees things. So I lock my screen with these.
Nice. Andrew asks for you to kind of talk about your queue list. Queue list 1 is purple blue. How does it run, and how many queue lists are you using?
Okay. So my main queue list here is for my busking. So that's why I have a lot of purple, blue, and like color like that, because some of these queues launch certain effects or certain things happening with my intelligence stuffs. And since what I usually do is I don't really open new show files, so I always create a new queue list for different shows. So my main queue list is always just more of what I do. So my busking and then my gala and stuff like that I'll put into my queue list. And then more of my other queue list that I do. Let me see if I can bring that. And then for the rest of the shows, you can see here, like these are shows that are always coming into my venue that I do every year. Like we do the show called Life Songs. We do a show with the high school kids called Art Spring. We have a vaudeville. The Luminous is our Cirque show. Behind the Curtain is an event that we always do at the Lensic. So you can see that I just always create a new Platinum Music Awards always happens here. So I just always go back to these these queue lists and start them over. So I'm not just having so many different queue lists or so many show files. So I just always go back to like, okay, I know if I'm doing Luminous again, I'm going back to queue list 5, and then I just kind of start over again and just get rid of that one. And it also helps sometimes to take old looks that people might have liked, and I could just be like, oh, we like that. Can we reuse it? And oh, yeah, and it's already there. If that answers the question.
Great.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's all the stuff that came in specifically for you for now. So
okay. Let's send it over to Jason. So Jason, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself just a little bit for everybody. And then Abel, I think you'll need to pass him the beach ball. There we go. And Jason can show us our file, or show us his file.
Pull up EOS. Great. So my name is Jason Cochrane. I'm do a couple of different things. I am a freelance programmer based out of Houston, Texas, and also most recently I've been the house electrician for Jones Hall for the Performing Arts, which houses the Houston Symphony and a couple other presenters who tour different shows through dance to comedy to stand up to right now we're doing a lot of live streaming and broadcasts with the symphony. But yeah, my show file is geared very differently than Abel's is. I am working more off of a blank slate, and I'm going to provide everything, and no one else uses my show file, so it's not really geared towards whoever might be coming in. So I've really started my show file with the idea of I don't know if I'm going to be able to be on a console, if I'm going to have to be on a computer with one screen, so I started from the smallest form possible and worked my way up. So on the very right over here, I've got all of my navigation tools, and it really helps me to, I don't want to have to hit, address to open up Patch. I can just, click right there, Patch is open, go back to live, go to some magic sheets here, and I'm also very magic sheet heavy. So, anything I do, whether it be adjusting fixture parameters, adjusting or running a show, whatever it may be, it's generally all off the magic sheet. So getting into the fixture parameter control, I have everything as simple from intensity, position, color. Generally, I'll have palettes, presets, anything relevant to that specific parameter, in addition to a handful of macros that are going to be useful for whatever I may be doing. You notice as I adjust from color to position, I even have snapshots just specifically calling the encoders on the bottom. So if I'm on a TI, I can hit position. I don't have to worry about position, hit a focus palette, or I guess color would be the better example here, but hit color and my encoders pop up. So if I have to nudge a color one way or another, I'm already there set to go. It's not another button press to get to the right, like a CMY page or whatever it is. And if I'm not on a TI and I have to adjust something like position, which is something that, actually something coming up new with Augmented that I'm kind of excited to start implementing in, is that I built this, I call it my nudger here. It all kind of started out with those shutter macros where you want to kind of nudge in your shutter, I don't know, 1%, 5%, 10%. I actually have a series of macros that copies everything to the hard keys on a Geo at 5 or a TI or a Geo. So if I'm in position here, I can go through and I want to back off my position or my pan 1%. So I can, well, let me go with color because I actually have a fixture patched here for example. So one is a just generic LED. So I can, if I want to add 5% red, I can just keep knacking that, and I'm just nudging everything one way or the other. But as I go, have same thing with all my beam attributes, just a lot of information there. I tried to organize everything in a fashion that works for me. And shutter. And for the most of my show file, I try and work kind of, when it has to do with shapes, I try and work graphically like this, here with all the shapes coming from the shutter, as well as Gobo. So when I go into a new show and I'm working with new fixtures I haven't worked with before, fixtures that I have, once I get everything patched in, imported from Lightride, I'll go through and through all the different Gobo images in there, delete all the extraneous information, and I'm there set to go. But these are all essentially just beam palettes. So even if I don't have that time, I can go, okay, chip 1, chip 2, chip 3, chip 4. I don't have to worry about like digging through a manual or having the cut sheet next to me. I can see everything, and the designer says, oh, give me that star Gobo. I think it was the third one. I can just click there real easy. I can go through, change my index and rotation, well, speeds or how far I want to index. And pixel mapping is, this sheet here is one of the things I'm kind of more excited to try out coming up sooner than later. I haven't had the opportunity so much because there hasn't been too much going on, but I'm looking forward to using or to having this tool here in front of me as opposed to kind of sitting there with a moving light control, changing all of my my pixel mapping options. But these are all different intensity palettes, focus, color, beam palettes, all referenced here with, most importantly, a blank space in the bottom to store all of those presets as I like it. One of the things I'm trying to incorporate more and more in my file is blank space so that when I find a look that I like, that the designer likes, that whoever I've got a place to put it that's organized, and I'm not digging around through a mountain of extraneous information. It's all organized, and I'm going to come up, like Abel said, you got to come up with a, like, real quick word to find a way to describe it, throw it in there, save it. That being said, I've built myself a little magic sheet here for what I call my show presets, so that my scene 0 is kind of my baseline. It's like I always want to have a place to store all of those and all that information, those presets, those beam palettes, those effects that are going to be useful throughout the entire show. So the stuff that I normally keep, like everything else is blank, but what I know I always need to have is I need to have a downwash, a crosswash, template downwash, so on and so forth. All the lights will probably need to point to center stage at one point or another. Create a few columns, create a few rows, have some presets for ladder washes, and there's a handful of shows I've been on that home position isn't always the home position. That we've been in a well, not one of my shows specifically, but after Hurricane Harvey hit in Houston, the opera moved into the convention center, and they had to have all the lights, their tilts with it 90 degrees so that they weren't sticking down and they weren't obstructing the view of scenery all the way in the back. So that became a handy tool I saw to have to rehome everything, send it back up out of the way, and also to do a reference check. But going on to like the different scenes, it doesn't have to be scene 1, 2, 3, 4. This could be the bar scene. This could be outside on the farm. This could be whatever. But if we're going to go back to, I don't know, we go back in Act 2 and we're back out on the farm, I can go back and reuse these same presets because it's all about that one location. This is something that's been increasingly useful now as we've been doing live streaming with the Houston Symphony, because I've been able to, like Abel was talking about with the, like saving all of his information from previous shows, this is how I manage saving all my information from previous shows is I have a week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and since we have an 18-week season, this basically works for me. I'll be able to recycle looks and store all this information in here in one easy consolidated show file. And I don't know if y'all have noticed, but I've been able to, on my navigation, I've been able to click through the entire right side, and I know exactly where these are all going to pop up. Everything on this right side will pop up in the same place on the monitor. At least when I'm on a computer. I haven't been on a console actually in the last almost 3 or 4 months because of COVID and everything. I'm normally sitting backstage in my little corner with my laptop open, and I'm also on a Mac at that, and been using this magic sheet over here, and especially these 3 buttons had been, well, incredibly useful because a MacBook Pro doesn't have a delete button or a page up, page down button. So that's been really helpful. Some of the other stuff in my show file, I have a show run magic sheet simply because with the symphony, we only really have 4 or 5 looks. And this is all I need to run a show. I don't need a go button because sometimes we'll be jumping in and out of order. The cameras are going to be cut away during a transition, so I don't have to worry about live moves or light flighting around on stage. I can just go from a piano concerto to a small chamber piece and press of a button. Don't have to worry about hitting go or go to cue this, go to cue that. Just hit that one macro button, and I'll take care of all of my navigation. And that's something that's at least everything on the right side of the page here. Well, let me go back to that. Sorry. Everything on the right side, that's something that's pretty universal to beyond the shell options, because I'm dealing with an orchestra shell every day, something that I'm going to see in just about every single venue or show that I've been in. That being said, everything here is controlled by submasters. I'm actually going to go to my second page and pull up my fader page. So another thing I have is I already have, there's nothing in any of these submasters, but they're already created, ready to go to be able to adjust parameters as I need. With my show file, generally top of the day or top of whenever I'm prepping for a show, I've done my light right, I've created all my database tags and everything, and I'll go through and I'll hit this macro here that's create subs, and I'll go through my patch and look for house, for works, for blues, for front of house position tag, for booms, for anything that might be relevant to my submasters, and it'll dump all that information in there. So one button press, and there you go. I have all my submasters. As long as I have the time, which you don't always have, to go through and do a little bit of light right work, which if you get doing it, it really only takes maybe 30 minutes to an hour to really get a thorough database. You got all your subs. Those also will populate moving light checkout lists, LED checkout, conventional checks, but I'll be able to go through, and all my macros that require database tags will allow me to kind of create all that information with just the press of a button. This is also the page where I have stuff like setting up like my default times, which just goes into setup and says, I want sneak to be this time, I want go to cue to be this time, and my different cue timings depending on, you know, if it's a kind of fast-paced musical, I'll go to cue timing short, and if it's something slower like a straight play, it'll be cue timing long. Some partitioning control for as I need it. I need to open up the partition, and some other partitions that are more relevant to the venue that I'm in right now to allow me to be in different orchestra shell configurations, or whether the orchestra shell's stored away. And we've had issues with people turning lights on and the orchestra shells all the way up in the ceiling, and there's a border 6 inches from it, and start smelling something smoldering. So partitioning really helps me in that case. And then actually talking about one of the macros, sending snapshots to other users is to send a PSD command to all users so that whenever Stage Manager might maybe knock a keyboard or someone else might knock a keyboard, I can always go back and go to setup. Okay, there's your screen's restored again. We're all good to go. When I'm normally programming a show, my screen will generally look like this. This is like my main, I call it my programmer magic sheet. I've got all the macros that I use all the time. Everything's kind of sorted out from left to right, storing or creating new information, updating information, some queue editing, offset, fanning, changing my views, and some other functionality. Some stuff's doubled up again because I've got park in 2 different places, and that'll both open up my my park windows. Query information, different hard keys that are hard to get to, like to get to Magic Sheet on a laptop, you normally have to shift F9, and it's a soft key that pops up on the bottom. That's too complicated to make that a macro. And then adjusting effects or parameters of stopping effects, sneaking them out, homing them. But it's just a giant bank of macros that I'm always going to use. I always want this handy. This is always going to, if I'm on a AT5, a TI, this is always going to be sitting above my CIA with it locked open, normally in the about window, so I can see what all is going on, and this is what I want to see. But I have a place to throw in groups as needed, nudge edge around, because that always comes in handy whenever you're focusing moving lights, flash and moving lights on and off, or whatever lights on and off there. Doesn't matter what they are, what channel they are. It'll kind of make things blink so I can see where something is if I'm losing a light. And then my basic focus grid again. And then some basic controls for like stepping through queues as needed. I've got some other magic sheets I don't nearly use as much. This queue editing sheet is for like that half hour, 45 minutes before the designer gets in the morning. Sometimes I'll be able to sit through, kind of clean up my live moves, dark moves, auto blocks, adjust timing as needed. This is just a bit more of a dense block of macros that allows me to, do what I need to do. And query is something that's constantly evolving, and something that I add to, it's more dependent on the show that I'll go through and add in more like relevant query tags as needed during my prep. And layout is something that I have been trying to implement, and I think I figured out finally for now the best version of how to do it is to create my different like rig magic sheets, so I can throw out all my moving lights can go here. I can these tabs are not used, but I can go through and in a magic sheet I can like make these buttons actually functional and put like, I don't know, footlights, cycle lights, my conventionals, my front of house, and I can tab through and see what everything does. But the 3 that I normally have available are my moving lights group, so I can throw my giant pages of groups as I try and make every single group out there, and then position, color, and gobos. A lot of this information also is, or I guess a lot of these ideas are it's all kind of sourced from other programmers, other operators and shows that I've seen, and like the way I've done my color and layered out these tabs, and just the way the information is formatted. A lot of this has come from talking with other designers and figuring out what works for them and what I can talk to, what I can pull from their show file that might benefit me. I don't think I could have figured out any of that information by myself. One big thing that I guess I want to show that this is my big help whenever it comes to busking shows is I've made a color picker so that when I do have like the odd concert or the odd show that needs some kind of like live busking coming through, that this is a really important tool that I've had where I can go through and it's still set up, looks like from Q last year, that I can go and create query labels and press a couple macros and populate all of this, so I can have essentially it's a dynamic color picker with some delay directions and some timing options that I can go and busk from. Essentially, it takes care of all my colors. I don't have to worry about any of that. I can spend the rest of the day worrying about all the other parameters I gotta deal with. And the most important button I think I have right here is my reset view, which will take me back to my base snapshot. I don't really have any very many other snapshots beyond encoder snapshots and a little bit for custom direct select navigation, which I try to avoid. But I'll have a 1 monitor, 2 monitor, 3 monitor snapshot that just get me around setting up my base show. And then from there, I use all my macros are essentially tab up, 1.3 tab down will bring me up another live summary tab. Yeah, no snapshots beyond flipping through to get around my different color parameter control. I don't really use snapshots that much, honestly. I just try and get it open every single tab that I might need, and I know exactly where it's going to pop up. I don't have to worry about re-recording or updating snapshots. I just kind of keep it all in that one base tab. Even my layout, I can click layout, and it'll go to my second workspace and call this Magic Sheet 2001 view 1, and I'm all set to go. That's about all I've got. I don't want to get into much of my effects because I'm not a big fan of the, see that already, there we go. My effects is a lot, and I need to get out of custom direct selects because it's not something that works for me. I need to get back to Magic Sheets there. So that's a constantly evolving process.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that's for the most part, that's really what I've got.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us, Jason. I'm sure we have some questions coming in.
Jason, on your screen on the left over there, below
yes.
your next and last, Tony's wondering what Magic Sheet item you're using for that number and how you're dealing with that.
Here, that's Magic Sheet 9000. I'll pull that up here and I'll show you. It's just a macro. It's a macro with the label, and the contents of the macro is the same as the label. So if it's 5, the contents of the macro is just going to be 5. Essentially what this does here, I'm in the kind of effect setup. So it'll be effect whatever rate plus 5, rate plus minus 5 to nudge those around. Actually, I can go ahead and go into this macro editor. Starts with macro 901. These are what you're seeing to change those parameters around. Let me get back to the top there. Yeah, I just have everything labeled there as nudger. I guess I just have, I forget this numbering scheme. This was a bit complex, but once I get to an intensity down to the bottom, I have a copy to nudger option, which is copying everything from the source macro to the destination, which will end up in the right hand of the column here. So as I reset and go to color, it's just copying from color would be macro 3901 through 3910 to macro 801 through 810. So it doesn't matter if I could be select channel 1 again, color plus 10, and start knocking blue up, or I guess blue down. you can see in the bottom of the screen, my blue is tracking down there. But that all, like I said, that all essentially came from when I'm working with shutters. Let me select, like I believe that's my very generic picture there, but I can go through and something positive and start working in shutters one way or another. But instead of having a grid of, this all really came because I wanted to have instead of having another grid of macros on every single page to deal with parameter control as opposed to having like a light hack box or a programming wing. This is my method of kind of nudging stuff around instead of like, having everyone's faces are there covering up the CIA button. But instead of having this around and going this channel, or I can't do control last because that wants to kick me out of the meeting. Yeah, instead of having to go through this and do like, oh, I need to pull a little bit of like lime out of there, I can just go through and do all the controls for my basic pictures. Like I don't have it set up so I can have a bunch of lusters set up in direct mode and it just color that way. But on my basic RGB, AW pars, and CMY, CTO moving lights, I can do everything I need to.
Very cool.
So I just want to mention it is 12 o'clock Central Time, so if anyone needs to run off to the hog session, you will not hurt our feelings if you jump out of here. So thank you for joining us. Thanks to our panelists. We're not ending. I just wanted to, if anyone needed to jump out, I wanted to give you all that out. But we are happy to stay and keep chatting and make sure we get all questions, as many as we can, answered. So keep going.
Very good. Joe asks what the idea behind the 3 pages is. Are they built-in shortcut keystrokes to change them? I think that's the
1, 2.
Yeah.
The idea actually came from, well, at least it all started with this kind of routing tab over here, I call it. I just needed a small little slender bank of macros to navigate around as I needed, and I don't know, it kind of frames the screen well, so I'm like really focused at the center of the screen, especially when I'm on a PC, and I've kind of focused on that quite a bit. Like, this is all about when I'm on a computer and I can expand to a TI or to an AT5 when I have 3 or more monitors. I don't know if you can kind of see here how I have things set up on a, oh, nice, that's even covering it up. But on a AT5, like when I'm really behind a console, I'm always going to have this docked right above the CIA. I'm going to have my tab 1, tab 2 set up on an external monitor, and my third monitor is going to look essentially like this is now. The only difference is that I'm going to have the show preset stuff on the bottom, and I'll have all my parameter control stuff up on top. But that way I can just be kind of focused on the center of the screen using, like, I guess, the meat of the screen for my common control. I guess it's kind of an ergonomics thing for me. I like to, when I have touchscreens, it's nice and easy to, like, run my hand up and down the screen and just kind of, like, knack the buttons I need. It's just comfortable for me. It works for me.
Yeah, I think that's the whole point of all this, right, is everybody will find their own way. Matt had asked what routing was, but it seems that that's just, that's sort of your...
Routing is kind of when I do this, I can just reset. Because I get really bad, especially with, like, I do a lot of, like, Vectorworks drafting and other CAD drafting that when I'm in some magic sheet, I just always get off. I always get off somewhere, so I need that button. And it labels what kind of I call this, and it just helps me, like, realign everything whenever I get lost.
Nice. One more question for Jason specifically. I think the others talked about this, but what is your common practice for relays on and off? Are you building macros to put those at full? What are you doing?
And I'll just mention that's coming from Gary Eschelmeyer. I may be butchering that. Who's also in Houston, so you guys may know each other.
Yeah, I know the name from a couple of years ago. So in Patch, let me open my CIA. I use custom fixture types as well, but I just assign everything to a custom fixture type, and then I can go into my macros and it queries the custom fixture type and just parks it. So simple as that. Sometimes I've gone to instead of that, if I have like moving lights and atmospherics or possibly other items that need hot power and might need to be switched on and off during the show, I'll create intensity palettes. And instead of doing query, I'll do group intensity palette, X for moving lights, Y for LEDs, and Z for, I don't know, whatever, like magnetic actuators or something like that. Yeah, I guess it really depends on the show, but generally, if it's everything just needs to be on, then it's create a fixture type and query. Actually wanted to go in and show my database tags. I forgot about this, about how I use the database. I guess I go step from general to specific for purpose and position. So my general purpose could be something from side light, front light, top light, set lighting. Purpose will get specific as to stage right shin, stage left shin. General position is front of house, overhead deck. That's how I create like that front of house inhibitor, so on and so forth. And position, I could just go something specific for third electric, second electric, stage left in one. If there's, I don't know, I've had moving lights acting as shins for like one piece in a dance festival, so it needed to be something broken up beyond or from the booms. Sometimes text 5 and text 6, I'll go through and add in unit numbers so I can easily call second electric unit 7, something that's nice and easy. Utility is what I label my houseworks blues and anything else that might be pertinent. If houses have like a chandelier or anything else that needs to be controlled by the console, I'll break it up to something more specific. But utility is also another place where I'll be able to sometimes I get inconsistent with my query labeling, but purpose and utility are both places where my house and works queries will search for to populate those stubs. Gel change is something that's come up because I've done a good handful of dance festivals in the past, but I just throw a little X in there and it lets me know that, hey, while we have 10 different gel changes in the booms today, I got to glow these at like 7% so the deck electricians can make sure that they got all the color right in their booms. Fixture type, it's kind of simplifying the general, like generic fixture type, the automated yoke wash, automated yoke spot. Just lets me simplify it to LED, conventional to moving light so I can populate those to inhibitors as well. And reference is just simply a reference channel because I've got some macros that I'll go through and create new by type presets. Thank you, David Kane, who showed that at Q last year. But some really cool macros that are incorporating creating new information with reference channels, like while you're in the middle of a show, without having to do everything manually. Yeah.
Very cool. Jason, one more question. Are you, Gary is asking again, are you typically entering this information in EOS or importing the fields from Vectorworks or Lightright? How are you kind of bringing that data in?
That gets into the fixture type mapping when you're importing. Like, I'll have everything set in Lightright. Like, I'll kind of, or actually, no, the way I had to deal with that recently is I exported from Lightright to the text file, I believe it is, like a CSV file, and I actually edited the CSV file to add instead of, I'll break it up into like relay 1, relay 2, relay 3, and then map those to specific fixture types in EOS so I can kind of delineate stuff as needed. It gets a little bit complicated, but I'm having to do a little bit of editing for augmented as well with all of that.
Very good. Thank you. Abel, John asks, on your rep plot magic sheet, you have dimmer numbers displayed. Do you use those as channels as well, or how do you handle that with rep plot and various programmers?
Yeah, so my rep plot's 1-to-1. So basically everything, the dimmer number is a channel number, and for especially if I'm the programmer designer, I don't really change the patch that way because I'm here all the time, so I know those numbers automatically. And when I have incoming designers, usually I will tell them, especially more with the intelligent stuff, like I'll tell, like when a dance company comes in and they're interested in using the LED PARs, I'll just be like, hey, look, I have them already. These are the channels I have them in, 401 through 424. If you don't mind, if you want to make things quicker, we can just merge that and keep that, and I can keep the palettes and all that, and we don't have to create colors for them. A lot of people don't really have these white bronze, especially since they're out of business now. So, and they're older models. So a lot of the people just work with me and they just leave those channels, which is also the dimmer, basically, and then I can just click away.
Very good.
If that answers the question.
I think so. Yeah, it made sense to me. Very good. Just a couple more questions that have come in. Andrew asked if the text field and patch stay with the dimmer number or the channel number when you're moving stuff around. That'll depend on which format you're in. So if you're doing something like a move to command in patch, if you are in channel mode, it's going to take those text fields with the channel. If you're in address mode, it's going to take them with the address. So that'll just depend on how you move it. But obviously there's a case for both, I think. And then something that I thought was a good little discussion point for everybody was, Rob kind of touched on it, but how frequently do you update your base show file?
For me personally, I update it probably 4 times a year. I like to break down seasons wise. Like I go beginning of the year, like winter, January. But then we have 2 maintenance periods here in the Lensic. We break down in January. We close down for 2 weeks and we clean the lights and all that. And that time I sit on my show file for a few days and clean out stuff that I don't need anymore, and I add things that I like or things that I've thought about and that I've created and haven't really had the time to really put into my show file more. So I'll sit down in January, and then we do it again in June, early July, and that's the 2 times that I usually change for sure my show files, and then probably another 2 times maybe in the fall and in the spring where other things come up and I have a time to really sit there, and then I just update it like that.
Show file basically as soon as I get a new idea, because there's some stuff in my show file right now that I mean, I could, like, looking through other people's show files or getting new ideas, it's like, oh, I need to change this. I can trim this fat. I can do something here to make myself, like, more efficient. But it's kind of instantaneous, because if I don't do it or write it down or get something started, I'm going to forget it.
I've got a kind of follow-up to that question for you guys. So how long did it take to get to where you are now with your show file? So how long have you been working on it? And that's very open to interpretation. And then kind of based on what you just said, Jason, have you ever made any changes, like so many changes all at once that it was detrimental to your ability to run, to where it was worse for you? Like, have you ever made that sort of mistake? Any cautionary tales on that front?
For me, yeah. But you don't mind. Let's see, I started this show file that I run now. I started running this show file the first time I went to Q, so that was, 4 years ago now? We just had one last year, and then The first one that I went to was 4 years ago, 5 years ago now. So that's when I really started this Magic Sheet show file, and more of the snapshots and the snapshots, and the macros that I built on it all really started after I went to that queue, and I started like, whoa, I've been making my life more complicated than it was. Especially a lot with the busking stuff that I learned in Q, and that's what I have. I have a lot of macros that I run, and I have added stuff to my Magic Sheet that has slowed me down or affected things, and I also have to think about other users, like high school kids using my show file sometimes and all that, so I've had moments where I've put too much information on there that I know what's going on and other people don't. And there are a lot of macros, and people will hit the macro, and then all of a sudden the moving lights are going crazy because they didn't know. So I have to keep my show file very manageable for other people that come in to use it. And that's why I say that I change my show file like 2 times a year, 4 times a year, where I can actually sit down and like, I know that I've created a macro that I haven't actually put on my Magic Sheet, but I know I have it. And I will sit down and I'll like look through my macro list and be like, okay, that was really effective. That was really effective. So I'm going to move that over to this Magic Sheet. I'm going to use that over there. But I just, one time I started just throwing a bunch of stuff I built, and it was just like a mess. And I was like, oh no, there's too much going on. And some of the kids were hitting the wrong buttons, and there was too many things. And then the way I label things is mostly for me too. So that was a problem. So I had to really just have a generalized, easy to read, easy to understand, so people don't be hitting the wrong buttons. So, I take my time adjusting and changing my sheet, my base file.
Yeah, I end up, as soon as I get a new idea, it's something as small as a macro or some ideas that I just want to try. So I don't always implement, like I'll implement it in my base file, but I'll kind of exclude it from like when I take the file to go actually run a show. Like I need a little bit of like trial and error time before it's like ready to be live. But I'll try and get something in place sooner than later. And I guess the things that I've been adding to my show file haven't been detrimental to any shows at all, where I can use it or not use it. If I figure out if it's slowing me down, then I'll just stop using whatever function that I've added. But no, if there's an idea that I have, it's like I'm gonna get real quick on to like implementing it. Like at one point, I was trying to get into the way that Biggie tries to, or the way that she does use partitioning has been really successful for her, but I can't really implement that into my workflow. I kind of gave it a shot, and I just had to like, no, this is getting a little bit too much. I just got to keep doing what I've been doing because it works.
Yeah, and I just to come back to something I touched on at the very beginning, like if partitions work great for her, not for you. Like that's the case with all these tools. Like not everyone needs to incorporate all of these things, but we're trying to present ideas, and hopefully everybody finds a way to use them that works for them.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the great things about Magic Sheets, but it's their configurability. But if you're someone who just needs to kind of create a shared, simpler show file that is just a couple banks of direct selects, that's something great, because I can't tell you how many times I've walked back into a venue after a show, and someone who might not have been as like a very skilled operator, very familiar with like Magic Sheet specifically, will have the Magic Sheet dragged all the way up to the top corner, and they just have a blank screen because, well, I don't know how to get it back. How do we get? So biggest thing with direct selects is they never disappear. But even with myself, the Magic Sheets, I have to find a way to call them back up to view, even when they've gotten knocked out.
Question that has come in, and I think this would be a great way for us to wrap it up. Frank asks if there's any advice moving from venue to venue with the same show and using the venue's rep plot and a show file. You're taking a show venue to venue.
I've run into this a little bit. I kind of take a a mentality that I guess a lot of MA programmers use. I try and kind of replace the like repatch everything with a kind of cloning mindset, if you will, where I have that one show file that I'm starting out with, that it's ready for the biggest plot you could possibly imagine, that if you've got like 20, 30 pars of every single color in each system and pipe ends and so on and so forth, so that you can just patch the channels that you need to patch. That if you only have 12 pars, just patch 12 of the 30. But I think it's a bit more of a complicated situation to get into. Sometimes with these shows, I'll try and create like use something like a BMFL or a Viper, some like very feature-rich moving light whenever I'm dealing with like different moving head spots or washes, so on and so forth, that you're trying to like compare a Verilight to a Phoenix Unico. Like, that's one of the hardest, especially dealing with the color systems, is you're going to be constantly updating the color systems. But if you can get all the intensities the same, if you can get close enough gobos, if you can get close enough positions, you're just trying to find, I guess, like the two, like, you want to start big and work your way down. I guess that gets into a very, very complicated situation right there sometimes, depending on the size of your show.
Very good. Thanks. That's all the questions we have. Great session, guys.
Just thanks again, Jason and Abel, for joining us. This was awesome.
Yeah.
And then as always, everybody, you can email me and Nick if you have any follow-up questions. Thank you. We'll be back in 2 weeks with multiple cue lists from Nick. Cool. Well, thanks again, and we will see everybody at the next one. And thank you, Nick, as always, for being my partner here. So we'll see everyone next time.